So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview, broadcast and recorded live on blogtalkradio.com from the new media and baseball capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. What a crazy, crazy world. When I invited today's guest, Karen Dunlap, president of the Poynter Institute, to be a guest on the show, it was ostensibly to discuss Poynter's upcoming collection of newspaper front pages titled President Obama, Election 2009. And we're still going to do that. But then everything got turned upside down. Sunday night, rumors of Tribune Company, owners of everything from the Chicago Tribune, Los Angeles Times, Orlando Sentinel, the Sun Sentinel in Fort Lauderdale, and even the Chicago Cubs declaring bankruptcy became reality on Monday morning. Then the August, you decide. New York Times revealed it was exploring mortgaging its new headquarters tower in Manhattan, you know, the one that crazy French guy climbed, to sustain itself through one of the worst newspaper advertising slumps in history. Oh, and then this morning, Alaska residents discovered they no longer had the most ridiculed governor in the nation, as Americans learned how allegedly and nakedly corrupt was the governor of Illinois. And we all had to learn to pronounce his name suddenly. Why is Governor Blagojevich, I knew I'd do that, Blagojevich relevant to a discussion of journalism topics? Well, in all the other headlines today, you might have missed reading that Blagojevich, the allegation of him pressuring the owner of the Chicago Tribune, and I quote, to fire a critical editorial writer. And it's only Wednesday, folks. Anyway, Karen Dunlap is a delightful woman who I've known for many years, back to the days when she was a college journalism professor. She is a trailblazer in journalism education circles and just a smart, savvy person to know. I always enjoy talking to her. And finally, in the interest of full disclosure, I have done freelance writing and editing assignments over the last several years for Poynter, most of which you can find, here's a plug, online at www.poynter.org. Karen, welcome to Mr. Media.
Hey, Bob, it's good to talk to you.
How you been?
And I like that website that you mentioned there at the end.
I thought that might appeal to you.
I thought you planned the chaos this week just to make the conversation interesting.
You know, I don't like to brag that I am capable of doing that, but, you know, since you brought it up, I would never lie. I'll always take credit for whatever I'm given. So what a week, huh?
What a week. One day was really astonishing to me. When the Tribune Company declared bankruptcy, you realize that it was a day in which 3 of the leading 5 newspapers in Florida were directly affected. 2 are Tribune Company, as you indicated, Orlando and Fort Lauderdale, as they call themselves, South Florida. And the same day, there was talk of sales of the Miami Herald. So one day in which a major state has 3 of its top 5 newspapers affected is something.
Well, I got to write a note to myself. I can't believe I forgot about the Miami Herald putting itself for sale. But, you know, it was that kind of week.
Yeah, it was. And I don't want to take the spotlight away from the other parts to think of Los Angeles with the L.A. Times at some form of risk, Baltimore and the Sun, Chicago and the Tribune. It's an amazing time.
It is amazing. I think if you're outside of the journalism industry, amazing might fit. I think if you're inside the journalism industry, you're probably your teeth are probably chattering because it's very scary out there.
I just want to say, I think the major story missed was if you were outside the newspaper industry, because the question you should be asking if you're not in this business is who will be reporting the news. Clearly, bankruptcy doesn't mean, or even sale doesn't mean that these papers will disappear. But in recent sales, I can't say that papers have become stronger in recent sales. And so I think there are a lot of citizens who ought to be asking who will be reporting the news.
Mm. Well, I want to give out our phone number because I suspect we'll have some people who want to talk about some of these issues. If you've got a question or comment for Karen Dunlap, president of the world-famous Poynter Institute in St. Petersburg, Florida, give us a call, 1-646-595-3135. Also, if we have a live web chat that accompanies the the live Mr. Media interview, you're welcome to ask your questions there or talk to other people. I see that the web chat is starting to get busy. I want to start, in fairness, by talking about the Obama book, because that's where we planned to go, and things just kind of spun out of control. So we'll come back to the fabulous, flailing world of journalism in a minute. But let's start the conversation with the Obama book and see where it takes us. This is
excellent idea. Excellent idea.
You may be nonprofit, but you got to think commercial at times, right?
Exactly.
This is Poynter's third collection of front pages, I believe, following the 9/11 disaster front pages and the death of Pope John Paul II, right?
That's right. That's right.
How is this one different from the other two?
The tone of each is different. It's a small matter, I guess, but the other two focused on, in a sense, tragedies, the 9/11 tragedy and then the death of a pope. This one is a celebration. And for me, it is a celebration of the work of journalists on a historic occasion. I mean, many people will see this as a celebration of an historic occasion, and that's important. But to me, it is a celebration of the work of journalists as you look at the various front pages and the way that people told the story of that election through their election front page.
What is it that's so compelling about front pages? I mean, I have a box in the garage. I'm sure they're yellowed and wrinkled, but of front pages that I've accumulated going back to, believe it or not, I think the oldest one I have is the assassination of Anwar Sadat, the former president of Egypt. What is it that compels us to own these?
Well, as you saw the numbers of people who went out to get the newspapers, it is clear that there's something that draws us to front pages, even at a time when people are saying newspapers are dying and they're old, they're ancient, and online is much more compelling, and it is, and other media have much to offer. There is something about a front page that announces literally, that really gives a headline of what is important. So the agenda-setting function is still there. It is a time almost when we come together as a society on a big story, and some brilliant person puts it together for us in a headline. It's captured there, and we can hold on to the moment through a front page. And I don't think there are many things that serve a function in that way. Now, beyond that, as you look at this book, you have to be impressed with the variety of approaches, the art in some, and just the general sense of how to tell the story.
Mm-hmm. Do you think this would have been as big a deal if Hillary Clinton had been the nominee and had won? So instead of our first African-American president, maybe we'd had our first female president. Would it have been as big a deal with the front pages and everything else that's happened?
I think the historic quality would have remained. So a historic front page would have made a difference. If the McCain-Palin ticket had won, there would have been historic quality in the vice president selection. But I think it is the historic quality that makes an additional factor in this election. It really wasn't a landslide. It was a pretty good divide in the electoral college, but the vote wasn't a landslide. It was a race, unlike some more recent ones. It was not tight at the end, so there was not that. It wasn't that unusual of a race, but the historic quality made it special.
Now, newspapers around the country announced huge single-day sales following the election. Do you think a weekly national election could save the printed newspaper industry?
I know some editors who would like that a lot. I mean, several weeks later, some editors I met with were still, they were resilient about seeing lines around the building, literally lines around the building, waiting to buy the paper, to running second and sometimes third editions of the paper to satisfy the crowd. So that would make a big difference in the lives of a lot of publishers and editors.
Now, I saw, my wife pointed out to me, I think in Sunday's New York Times, and I know that the New York Times has had a store selling product for a long time,
right.
But they were product heavy on Obama products this time. Right. Is that is that a model that other newspapers are following? Are we seeing that elsewhere?
Yeah, other news organizations are following. These are smart people. So I think you have a wide range of news organizations selling that front page from that day. And many will just sell the front page. Some will have related products. a cup or something else, a T-shirt from the day, a T-shirt with the front page on it. Yeah, these are not crazy people. They see crowds. They know that there's an interest. They have access to this material, so why not use it? You see Time Magazine and others presenting a sort of capturing the year of the election, capturing the campaign. So there's a great material. There's great art, photos, and other forms of art. Why not use it? Many are doing that.
Now, I just realized that I left the Poynter's the book. It's called President Obama, Election 2009. I left it beyond arm's reach. I actually got it at lunchtime today, and so I apologize for that. So I'm going to ask you what some of your favorite front pages in there are.
Okay, and I will describe them for you. I'm sorry you can't look at them with me. I'm so glad you asked. I have a number of favorite front pages. I think this book is great. I think it's outstanding. Let me just tell you 4.
Try to hold back a little bit on the enthusiasm, okay?
I can't help it. A lot of people were impressed by the Chicago Sun-Times, and that's the front page that was a portrait, a sepia portrait, and the only caption says Mr. President. So you have a direct headshot of the president. And then at the bottom of the page it says Mr. President. Rather serious expression, but it is altogether different for a front page, and it says that it was a well thought out front page. So you have the hometown of the candidate who's elected, and a really nice presentation on the front page. My second favorite is Across the World. It's Brussels, Belgium, and it is a front page that simply uses type, in a sense, as the art for the front page. It uses the word change in large letters near the top of the page, and then the rest of the page is the word change in other languages. There's about the fourth at the top of the page is a photo of nobody that you know. It's just a crowd scene, jubilation. In the center is an African-American man who seems to be crying. They're waving the American flag. So it's not really about anybody. In the corner, there's a small picture separately of Obama, but the page is really about change. I thought this was an excellent use of text as a graphic device, just on change. 2 others use a different approach. The Orlando Sentinel and the Hartford Courant used a full page wrapper all around the paper, so the front and back page, in effect, are merely one photo. And the picture used in the Orlando Sentinel was a crowd shot of Grant Park. So you see the candidate really is just a small figure in the scenery there, but with the major part of the paper is the huge crowd. It's an excellent photo. One of the buildings has USA on it in lights on the building, so you get the sense of this nation. You see the flags. You see Obama and his family going down the runway, but it's not really focused on them. The message there is the crowd, and the headline says, "This is your victory." And finally, the Hartford Courant used a similar approach of a wrapper, a full page, but in this case, it is a full page of the family, all 4 members of the Obama family. In those 4, you see very different approaches to capturing the same event, and they are just a few that stand out to me.
Well, while you were talking, I cheated, and I put my headset down for a second and ran over and got the book, because the one that I wanted to mention, the one that I really liked, is actually very different from the others, and naturally it's a college paper. It's the Boise State University, The Arbiter, and what I liked is it's got McCain. It's hysterical, and it's beautifully drawn. I guess it's painted, actually. It's McCain and Obama arm wrestling, and you see the last second is the action of Obama beating McCain, who's gritting his teeth. Obama beats. I just think that's a wonderful. It's just very clever, and it's very different than either the smiling Obama or the very stern Obama waving.
I would agree, and that the ability to illustrate that with the sort of the look of movement of the hands is important. But that says something else that struck me about this. I mean, this is not something that just sort of emerged just before. This is not a headline. This is not something that just came up within the last few hours before the paper was put to press. I think about it's going to be one or the other. It's almost like some sports events. Either one team or the other is going to win. So you have time to prepare. and some pages, and this is one of them, really suggest the time that they put into preparing for it, and others treated it like a news headline.
Mm-hmm. Now, I had the good fortune to be involved in the build-up to the book that Poynter did when Pope John Paul passed. As a matter of fact, I remember there was a great waiting game because everyone in the world knew he was close to death, and the book was being organized, and it's a very interesting behind-the-scenes process. One of the things I noticed and I understand to be different about this book from even that one is that there's a broader selection. The books in the past have had international covers, so that's not so unusual. But what's interesting here, I think, is there are college papers. There are the Northwest Asian Weekly has a wonderful color illustration, and there are international, but some of the college and the alternatives give it an extra different flavor.
I thought that was a brilliant move. Julie Moves took the lead on this along with Sarah Quinn in making selections. Julie is an editor on the online page of Poynter Online, and Sarah is on the faculty of visual journalism. And I think it was really a good thing they did to include, as you indicated, college papers, because you bring in students, and there were so many young people who were energized by this election. So how did they cover it? And you named the one with the Boise paper. The other thing is that there are alternative weeklies from around the nation. There was an attempt to bring in the ethnic press, and so you have a couple of African American papers, some historic, a Spanish language paper, a Jewish paper, and then there were other ways in which 12 international papers. So we wanted to get voices outside of just the major daily news organizations, and they bring a very good flavor to the book.
Now, is it just coincidental that the alternatives and the weeklies are in here, or is it part of the bigger picture looking ahead for Poynter, where Poynter has traditionally been, daily newspapers, and more in recent years, radio and TV have become a bigger part. But looking forward, I mean, I guess you have to broaden your audience, and maybe giving the alternatives and the college papers and the ethnic papers a little exposure to the Poynter operation, probably not a bad idea.
It's not. In my 20 years here, we've used the phrase that we like to have our groups as diverse as possible. So it's not at all unusual, as you know, for us to have international participants in our program. And from the beginning, we have had a college program, and we also teach high school and middle school students. So we like to have young people in the building. At least during the summer, we have young people. We have worked also with alternative newspapers and ethnic newspapers, but in a more limited way. So this sort of reflects what we've done, but also indicates the things that we are looking forward to as we proceed.
Mm-hmm. I want to point out to listeners that Gary Trudeau, the creator of Doonesbury, did the introduction for the book. Nice get there.
Well, it's not just his name. He really has a really good introduction here, and he addresses the matter you touched on, that you don't really see people dancing in the streets much anymore. You don't see people standing in line to get newspapers, but that Election Day, November 4, was different. And then he gives some of the figures on the reprints of papers, the Washington Post, the number that it reprinted, and other organizations, how they reprinted. So he did a great introduction to lead into these front pages.
Let me remind everybody, you can find the book. We're gonna move on to some other subjects. You can find the book President Obama, Election 2008. I don't know why I keep saying 2009. I'm just thinking ahead, I guess. Yeah, you can find it in bookstores. Amazon.com has it, although it doesn't say when it's being released, but it is available this week, so it is out there. If you ordered it already, you'll have it in days, I understand. And you can also order it at Amazon, as I say. You can order it MrMedia.com very soon. And if you're in the web chat, I posted a link there. You can order it there. And if you've got let me remind you, if you've got a question or comment for Karen Dunlap, president of the world-famous Poynter Institute in St. Petersburg, Florida, which specializes in journalism studies, journalism education, give us a call, 1-646-595-3133. 888-866-3635.
Let me just add, you can also get it through Poynter.org. You can also order a book there.
I don't want to take anything away from Poynter.org, of course, yes.
And I want to, I know you want to move on, but can I just say a couple of more things about some pages?
Of course, at $1 a minute, though, Karen.
Yes, please, Bob. One other touch that I particularly liked that the editors use in the book is that they call it a political, I call it a personal history. So some of the selections were based on the 4 primary candidates. Therefore, you see Alaska, Arizona, Illinois, and Delaware. So there are papers representing each of those. I mean, if you're the home state of somebody who loses, how's it covered? But in addition, because Obama has such a diverse past, we have Jakarta, Indonesia, where the headline was Barry's Done It, his old name, Barry's Done It, as well as Hawaii and Illinois. Mm-hmm. And I'll stop there, Bob.
Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. And do the proceeds to this book go generally to the Institute, or are they intended for a specific purpose?
This is, we will get the proceeds from this. The percentage of sales comes to Poynter. Unlike the first one, September 11th, that was a bestseller, we went into that with the commitment that we would not get the proceeds. We will get the proceeds for this. We're talking about it primarily for scholarships in a year in which many news organizations will have difficulty sending journalists for training. And it's part of our appreciation to the news organizations that gave us the rights to use their front pages. We hope to use it for scholarships to keep people coming in a difficult year.
Okay. Well,
so buy one, buy many, buy for all your friends. It goes to a good cause.
Buy them for all your poor journalism friends who may not be buying a lot of presents this year.
It'll cheer them up.
Now, this is the part of the program where I may use a stronger word or two, so those of you who have tender ears, you may want to cover them for a second. As I described in the introduction, this has been an unusually colorful week for newspapers, Karen. So, and let's try to take events in order in the time we have left, which is about 20 minutes, I think. What was your emotional response to the Tribune Company filing for bankruptcy? Was that an oh shit moment even for someone as proper and dignified as Karen Dunlap?
It was. I was going to say if I use that word, but it was very much a surprise in a day in which sort of started with that they were talking to lawyers, bankrupt companies, officials about a bankruptcy, and I sort of had the sense that, as some reports indicated, they were just talking because this was something that might be in the offing, or they just needed to know what they would be involved in bankruptcy. And then in short order, they filed for bankruptcy. So that was pretty surprising. Things moved quickly. That was surprising.
Do you think it would have gone any differently if someone other than Sam Zell had bought the newspapers and the company?
That's hard to say. You know, there have been other large sales lately, and you involve different personalities and sort of different perspectives, but the outcomes have not necessarily been that different. There are two things. The things that stand out to me are debt and the downturn, and so some other owners might be perceived more warmly by their staffs, but they still have to deal with debt and the downturn.
Right.
The Tribune Company had a higher level of debt than most, but they still had to deal, like a lot of others, with debt and the downturn. So I'm not sure if it would have been a lot different in the bottom line if there had been a different owner.
I remember a conversation we had, and I don't remember if it was in person or if it was via email, shortly before Zell bought Tribune Company, and it was at the time where David Geffen, I think, was considering buying the Los Angeles Times, and there was talk. Right. I think even Donald Trump was talking about buying a newspaper, and I remember saying to you, maybe Poynter should look into doing a journalism business course for would-be newspaper titans to kind of get them behind the scenes and understanding, and we kind of laughed about that. In retrospect, maybe that would have helped.
I remember that. I remember those conversations, and I think our interest was primarily to have owners come in who understood the importance of journalism, of course. Mm-hmm. But at that time, I don't think any of us could have imagined how difficult the situation has become for news organizations. And of course, now you don't hear a widespread interest in buying newspapers.
Yeah. No, I don't hear any. I think what we're seeing is, there's always been this thing in business where, okay, well, when it's time to put an asset up for sale, and we see this, I follow Publishers Weekly as well. I think Read Business today took one of its units off the market because nobody wanted it. And it used to be, 2 years ago, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that when an ongoing publishing concern, whether it be in newspapers or books or magazine, went up for sale, there was always somebody who wanted to buy it and thought they could realize profit or turn it around or fix it or whatever. That does not seem to be happening today.
Well, yeah, but let's keep in the mix the difficulty of credit right now.
Right.
So
absolutely.
If you were inclined to buy and you had a very good business plan, you will likely have a great deal of difficulty simply getting credit, no matter how good you look or how good the organization looks. And the other thing, because I'm always concerned about sounding as though this is a dead medium, there are many organizations that are still profitable. The problem is that they are not as profitable as they were at one time. And there's a lot of life left in newspapers, both as newspaper organizations, both with the printed paper and in the online ventures that they are pursuing. We're just sort of midstream, and most organizations haven't figured out yet how to make money in a changed environment. I have no doubt that many will and be very profitable again.
Well, if the Chicago Tribune situation was not an oh shit moment, pardon my French, what about the New York Times exploring the mortgaging of its just completed and occupied Manhattan headquarters to use to pay off or head off some big credit facility bills coming due in 09 and 10? That has to concern you somewhat.
Actually, that was much less of a concern and maybe less of a surprise, and here's why. Newspaper properties have come up in many conversations now. There was talk of selling the Philadelphia Inquirer Daily News building, and with reduced staffs, that actually makes some sense. I mean, I've talked to again, editors and publishers, and I've raised this expecting a huge sense of indignation, but they say, well, hey, it's prime real estate. We're not using that whole building, and of course there's an emotional attachment, but part of the reality now is that a lot of news organizations don't need the space. They do need cash. In the case of the New York Times, they're not selling their building, a new building, a beautiful building, and as I understood it, they were coming to the end of a cash plan, and they simply wanted to draw out a new line of credit. So that one was really much less of a surprise to me or a concern.
Well, but then also, I mean, their November ad revenues are way off. So, I mean, they're certainly they're looking ahead going, okay, it's not getting any better for a while, and we need to look at alternatives. I mean, if that happened...
That's true.
If that happened here...
Their figures have not been good, and because they are such an excellent company, it is a concern. In some ways, they don't have resources some other major companies have to turn to. And so I know it's a burden for the executives there to figure out what's the future of that very historic and very good news organization. That's probably sort of gets my attention more and is a greater concern than the fact that they took out a line of credit on the building.
I remember being in New York, and I don't remember if it was the summer or in the spring of 08, and reading New York Magazine's media critic, and I apologize, I can't think of the man's name at the moment, but he wrote a very serious, very considered column about how it was time for the New York Times and New York Times Company to take the lead in the industry and declare that print newspapers were dead, and to take the leap now, early, and jump into a digital-only or virtually digital-only environment. I think I know what you're going to say to this, but and there have been other people who've said it, and the much smaller but highly respected Christian Science Monitor recently announced that it was going to do exactly that. What do you think about all this?
Go ahead, Bob. Tell me what I'm going to say.
I think you're going to say print is not as dead as some people think, and you're not going to be the one to put the last nail in its coffin.
Now, I think the problem is that print organizations don't have the economic model that allows them to let go of the advertising the dollars revenue they can still get with print. I think if the next step was very clear and there was the expectation that even if you didn't get the same level of revenue, you could get a substantial amount of revenue by just going electronic, I think you'd see more jumping to that. But as some people have said, there's still a lot of money on the table for print. Now, so what will be there in a year? At what point do the expenses outweigh the advantages of staying in print? Then you see more of a tipping point. But I think the big challenge, and this is no secret, is finding the economic model online that really generates some revenue. As far as the New York Times, Arthur Sulzberger said some time ago that I think he said he was media agnostic, and they have taken big steps in online. So they might be moving as fast as they can. They make good money on the print product now, and so I don't think they'll give that up until things change a little more.
I mean, I think that my experience of being kind of on the periphery of the business for 25 years as a freelancer and just someone who's followed it, it's always seemed to me that newspapers have been run by newspaper people, not necessarily business people, which probably is part of what Sam Zell was thinking when he bought Tribune Company, that he probably thought, well, if a business plan, a real business plan, instead of a journalist idea of a business plan was applied here, this is a good business. I can make a lot of money. But most journalism operations are still run by journalists who don't have that business training or understanding, or I think a lot of them give lip service to it. But I appreciate what you're saying about that there's still a lot of money on the table in terms of advertising, but that money on the table doesn't fit the budgets that these newspapers have been running on for so long, and so we're seeing that. I mean, at the St. Petersburg Times, which is very near and dear to your heart and mine, they went through early retirement plan. They haven't gone through the mass layoffs that others have, but others have gone through layoffs. They're trying to squeeze into a different type of plan, but it's very hard on these companies. They're not geared up to be run like a business. They're geared up to be run for journalism, and they're emotion driven in the sense that they respond to the day's events and the politics and economic issues, and they can write about economic issues with great clarity at times, but they can't necessarily turn around and adapt those same economic issues and thoughts to their own plan.
Well, let's explore a little bit. I think what you're talking about, in large part, is the emotional attachment to the known, the emotional attachment to print, because that's what we do. Mm-hmm. And yes, we are in an environment where significant change is needed. For that matter, a lot of people will say significant change in the advertising areas are needed, that advertisers are used to approaching companies that want an ad in your paper, and now maybe they need to be targeting audiences and delivering audiences to advertisers in a different way. So there is an emotional attachment to the known, and the known is print. And let's just add, the elements of print keep going up. Newsprint is going up at a significant rate. The gas to deliver the paper might be down for a few minutes, but it's costly. So yes, there are forces that say we need to move away from print. Yes, there is an attachment to the known, which is print. I'm not sure if it's just the matter of not being able to use business principles, because at that point I would bring in the car industry. Have the same problem. We do this, we know how to do this, we're going to stick with this. That's not working. You know business, but you need to do something different with your business. And that applies to the car industry and to the newspaper industry.
Mm. Well, I think I think that the newspaper industry had trouble applying before we were in the crisis. I mean, the global economic crisis that we're in now. I think you can go back to any time, and lots of newspapers had issues applying general business practices that might be found in other industries to what they do. The car industry is a great example of people who supposedly understood economics and still screwed up. No doubt about that. But I mentioned the Christian Science Monitor going to an all-digital edition. Another bigger example in some ways, I think, is the company, I can't think of the name, the company that owns PC Magazine and all these electronic magazines, they were the first to and they just gave it up on PC Magazine. PC will no longer be available in a print edition at all. All of their magazines, as I understand it, are digital only. And it was a big leap, but they found it to be very profitable. Do you think it's going to take a New York Times to throw up its hands at some point? Maybe it's not 2009, but it seems to be coming. Somebody is probably going to be the one, someone bigger than the Christian Science Monitor will throw up their hands and say, you know what, it's all digital. We just we eliminate the print costs, we eliminate the delivery costs, the gas costs. We refocus on being a journalism organization, and just it's about the content and the distribution, the electronic distribution and the packaging more than the physical distribution.
Yeah, I think within a year or two, you'll see significantly more news organizations taking that route. I'm not sure if it takes an industry leader. I don't think people are necessarily waiting for one of the industry leaders to make the change. I think they are primarily thinking about how do we move in this direction. I just want to point out, the Christian Science Monitor took an interesting step, but they are a specialized publication. Mm-hmm. Among other things, they have a national audience. They have a very low circulation for a very wide range of readers, so it made much sense for them to go electronic. And as it makes sense for other organizations, I think you'll find them moving toward that. They need a few more things. But even as they do that, I would expect some of the print product to remain. As you know, more and more companies are talking about publishing fewer days a week. So it might be that you have a print Sunday paper, maybe 2 or 3 other days a week. You have an electronic paper, but I think that there'll be some form of print that remains. The possibility is that the print paper will be, in effect, for an upscale audience. It will cost a lot more. It gives you the depth that you like in reading. There might be more targeted papers in this area, TBT, free distribution. So there's a range of things. I think there'll be some print products, but I would expect that a lot of companies will be moving toward electronic as quickly as they can figure out what they need to do.
I'm sure you're right about that. It definitely seems that varying your use of your content is going to be a big thing. I remember reading a year or two ago about Gannett opening these moms publications and moms websites, I guess, at its papers in many cities. And here in St. Pete, the St. Pete Times has added Go Mama, which is
right.
My first thought was, gee, that seems kind of odd, but I tell you, it's extremely well done. It draws on the resources of the paper, and then they also have their Bay magazine, which is an upscale thing, and it's all coming out of there, and it looks like it's very profitable. You mentioned TBT, so yeah, it's just hopefully there'll be a lot of thinking about the future and moving towards it. We have just a couple more minutes left, and I want to turn attention back around to the Poynter Institute itself.
Okay.
Poynter was started by late St. Pete Times publisher Nelson Poynter, and the newspaper and the Institute have always enjoyed a much envied relationship in the industry of independence, and what was good for one was good for the other. But now, as profits for the Times Publishing Company have slowed in these very strained economic times, how has it affected the relationship between the Times Publishing Company and Poynter, and then how has that affected Poynter's business plan? How have you had to evolve yourself?
The effect is much greater on part 2, the business plan, than in the relationship. In effect, the relationship hasn't changed. The Institute is still the owner. The Institute still receives dividends from the St. Petersburg Times, but here's the difference. For most of our 30 years, about 90% of our income or more, almost all of it, came from the dividends of the St. Petersburg Times. Intentionally, we started making an effort to diversify our income. So we have many more grants now. We have a development program. We get some return from an investment account, and we still get dividends. So, but the percent of our income from the dividends has gone down. We face the challenge that our 3 major sources of income are dividends from a newspaper, tuition from a news industry, all of which is challenged. We've talked about newspapers, but television's had huge layoffs at the end of last week. And the third part of our income comes from return on investment account, and there's that thing, the stock market, that is not making us happy. So, yes, we're challenged. Yes, we face the reality that a lot of people think that we are well endowed and therefore don't need assistance. but we do welcome contributions, sale of products, and other things, and we're in good shape. But it's a challenge for us, just as it is for much of the industry, for the journalists, the many journalists who come here.
Is it hard for some of the old newspaper hands at the Institute, many of whom I have to say I call my friends. I'm not going to call anyone out or name names, but I'm friends with an awful lot of people there. But is it hard for some of the old newspaper people there to grasp just how troubled print media is?
I think that over the last year, just as in the industry, I think we've come to understand that things are difficult and things are changing. One of the more controversial steps we've talked about, and we'll probably follow through on in 2009, is some courses for non-journalists, primarily citizens, say on writing. And that took a lot of argument and discussion here. It will probably be done separately. We won't have it with journalists, but we have a community conversation now where we invite citizens in to talk to journalists on a topic. We'll probably do some more things for the public, in a way helping citizens better understand the role of journalists, but also there is a business element to it, appealing to a different audience. And a lot of that took a lot of discussion and some hurt feelings, but we live in a different world, just like newspapers and broadcast news and others, and so we're trying to move in that world while maintaining our values.
Finally, and we've zoomed through our time, I think. You've been a very good sport about some questions that I'm sure were not the most fun to deal with. What will the future look like for Poynter? How will the Institute, which just to remind people who may have joined us late, Poynter Institute is focused on journalism education, furthering journalism issues, studies, discussing things, and the business, and that's journalism as it applies to newspapers, TV, radio, online, all that kind of thing. How will all of this continue to evolve in the coming years?
Our first strategy, Bob, is for you to write us a large check, and we just continue doing the things that we're doing.
Well, right after I win the first Pulitzer for online journalism, in podcasting, I will do that.
We'll hold you to that.
You know what? I will tell you right now, Karen, if I win the Pulitzer, someone will have to nominate me. But if I win the Pulitzer for online journalism and podcasting, whatever they've decided to call it, I will give 50% of the award to the Poynter Institute. So go ahead and nominate me. Take a chance.
Okay, we'll do that. Our second strategy, we're prepared to do a lot more electronic teaching. In fact, January is a month of electronic teaching. And that's because as we talk with people in newsrooms, they say we will be less able to send people to your campus in St. Petersburg. So we will get out more regionally, but we will also do a lot of electronic teaching, webinars. Virtual Poynter will beam our teaching directly to a newsroom so that we're answering the needs and we can see them, they can see us. We've tested that this last part of the year. That works well, as well as NewsU and Poynter Online. We'll do a lot more of that. We will continue to have classes here, and I hope people will begin to see that as as a different step from what you learn online. This is the master class where you come and spend some time with others, spend a week, 3 days a week, and really learn. But like newsrooms, we are evolving new approaches, and they are largely electronic.
Well, folks, you can order the Poynter Institute's new collection of newspaper front pages, President Obama, Election 2008, at great bookstores everywhere or online from Amazon.com or mrmedia.com. That's MrMedia.com. And you can learn more about the Poynter Institute, as Karen mentioned, at www.poynter, it's Poynter.org, as well as its online education arm, www.newsu.org. And Karen, it was a great program, and thanks so much for joining us on Mr. Media today.
I had fun talking to you, Bob. Good to talk to you.
All right, see you soon.
All right, bye.
All right, bye-bye. And of course, folks, for dozens more celebrity and media newsmaker interviews, particularly if you're interested in journalism, come on over to the site, www.mrmedia.com. I actually pulled up in front of me so I could tell you some of the journalists have been on here. If you're new to Mr. Media, you may be surprised. Recent interviews with Pulitzer Prize-winning editorial cartoonist Clay Bennett, MediaBistro.com founder Laurel Tooby, Bill Adair, the editor of PolitiFact.com and political editor for the St. Petersburg Times, Alberto Ibarguen, the head of the Knight Foundation for which funds a lot of journalism, Sri Srinivasan, the head of the Graduate School of Journalism at Columbia University, my good friend Eric Deggans, media critic for the St. Petersburg Times, another friend Aaron Barnhart, media critic for the Kansas City Star, Howard Finberg, the head of News U at Poynter, Pete Hamill, Chuck Shepard, who does the News of the Weird syndicated column. A lot of journalist interviews on Mr. Media. Come on over, give them a listen. And please think about writing an online review of Mr. Media, casting a vote for Mr. Media, or marking Mr. Media as one of your favorites, whether you listen on Blog Talk Radio, Digital Journal, Podcast Pickle, Vox, Folio, MediaFly, Podfeed.net, Blueberry, Zencast Audio, the Kindle Reader, or iTunes. And you can add us to your RSS feed, and you'll never miss the program. If you've got an idea for a guest, you can email me directly at bob@andelman.com. That's ANDELMAN.com. So, thanks so much for joining us today. As you know, if you're a regular listener, I very much appreciate when you give up a little piece of your day to spend it with us.